When I was a little girl, and whenever I got the chance, I would go down into our basement and pull out some of my favorite vinyl records. I'd position myself in front of this wall of smoky tiled gray mirrors, you know, the kind that are like 8 by 8 with the mustard yellow design throughout them. Our basement was very retro. I would dig my little toes into the shag rug, and I would steady myself to sing along with some of my favorite artists like Cher and Olivia Newton-John, and my absolute favorite, Barbra Streisand. I loved singing. I would spend hours on that pretend stage imagining that my voice could inspire and empower and evoke emotion, just like my idols' voices did for me. It's no surprise, really, my love of music and of singing, because I grew up with it in my home. My dad was a classically trained tenor, and he had this old style tape recorder. It was like the reel-to-reel style that he would use when rehearsing. So on one particular Friday night, I decided to record myself too. I was ready. I'd been rehearsing. I could hit all those same high notes that Barbara did. After I finished singing, I quickly rewound on the recorder, and I waited with bated breath to hear my voice played back to me. I was sure it was going to sound just like Barbara, and that it was going to be amazing. What I heard played back to me sounded like nobody's voice I had ever heard before. And it definitely didn't sound worthy of being heard beyond those four walls. I was mortified and so disappointed that on that fateful Friday night, at the tender age of 11, I put my dreams of becoming a singer away. But my deep-rooted desire to use my voice never really left me. And so many years later in my career, when I was approached to work in media, it was an easy yes. It reignited that little girl desire in me, getting me back up on a stage, using my voice to inspire, empower, evoke emotion, make positive impact in someone else's life. But for as much as speaking about something I knew about felt good, from somewhere deep inside, I felt that there was a more important message I was meant to be sharing. It started to consume me. I felt repressed and restless. At first, I tried to stuff what I was feeling down. And then I tried to make light of it by calling myself a midlife wife, because I was, after all, that woman that had it all. But still here I was, feeling restless. Fortunately, the one person that I always felt comfortable using my voice with was my husband. So when I spoke to him about how I was feeling, he simply said this: just do what makes you happy, Lydia. Whatever that thing is, figure it out and just do it. That was his MO. That was the talk that he walked. He was so happy, and he was so present, and he was so happy in the present, and I really envied it, actually. But in addition to being my personal life coach, my husband Mike was also many other things, including a very busy businessman who truly worked very hard to provide this midlife wife with her idyllic life. And his business had him traveling a lot. Over time, I could see the toll that the time zones and the travels were having on him. And on one Sunday afternoon, as I was dropping him off at the airport for a 5-day whirlwind trip to China, I said to him, I'm worried about you. I don't like what's happening here. You're tired. And he looked over at me with a weary smile, and he squeezed my hand, and he said, I'll see you Friday. As I watched him walk away in my rearview mirror, I remember my heart feeling really, really heavy, thinking, there he goes on another trip he just doesn't have the energy for. That picture of my husband walking away in my mirror is forever etched in my memory, because that's the last time I saw him alive. He died 3 days later from something called a heart arrhythmia, where sometimes for reasons unknown, which are still unknown to me to this day, the heart simply skips a beat and stops. In those first few days after the news of his passing, I remembered laying awake so many middle of the nights, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my life with Mike and how supported I felt in our marriage. I remember thinking about how much I valued his wisdom and his perspective and his innate ability to find humor in every situation and make light of everything. I thought about how I could capture his essence and how I could honor him best. And I realized I had an opportunity to do that at his funeral. It was another call for me to use my voice. As I walked up to the front of the church, I looked over at his picture that was sitting beside the urn holding his ashes. And I could hear his voice as clear as anything in that moment saying to me, look at you. Aren't you in your element right now? And you know, I kind of was. No, actually, I really was. because I was about to step on the most important stage of my life and speak some of the most meaningful words I'd ever spoken. It didn't matter if my voice sounded good. It didn't matter if it wavered or if I had to take pause to hold back some emotion. All that mattered was that it be heard. And so after I shared some sweet memories and some funny anecdotes about my life with Mike, I asked everybody there that day to do me one favor. I said, when you think of Mike moving forward, I want you to remember him in the same way, with the same set of emotions that he evoked in you when he was alive. And do you know that by the time I was finished speaking, in what would have seemed a most unlikely occasion, there wasn't one person in that church of standing room only people that wasn't smiling. My voice didn't have to sound good that day to be great. It just had to be heard. From that day forward, I took his advice just to do what makes me happy. And eventually it led me to a place where I started to feel grounded and centered. And one day, finally at peace. And in finding that inner peace, it felt like I'd found a missing piece and the answer to the restlessness that I'd been feeling for so long. You see, because inner peace doesn't come from getting what we want. It comes from remembering who we are. I knew right then and there I had to get back up on a stage. So I hired a business coach, and we worked on my key messaging, and we created a social media presence, and we got me some speaking gigs, and I was feeling healthy and strong and validated again. And then the cancer diagnosis came in, right here. I had 2 major surgeries in the space of 9 months, and I have a 7-inch scar that runs from behind my left ear all the way down to the middle of my throat. And thank God beyond that, I'm okay. But if ever there was a clearer message staring me in the face, it was this. It doesn't matter what your voice sounds like. It doesn't matter whether you speak it from a stage or a page, whether it's paid or unpaid, whether it sounds like Barbra Streisand or any other songbird. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that it be heard. Because here's the thing. When we don't express, we repress, right? And there is some evidence that suggests repression can lead to things like depression or maybe other illnesses. Who knows, right? Expression, on the other hand, leads to connection. And next to food, water, and shelter, the sense of love and belonging we get when we connect is the most fundamental of human needs. So here's the main point I'm wanting to make for you today. Just because I choose to use my voice, speaking it from a stage, does not make it any more valuable or important than anybody else's voices. We all have voices that need to be heard. And they don't have to sound good to be great. My own 3 daughters know all too well the power and influence of using your voice, because it was their collective voices that inspired me to take a really hard look at myself, following my grief journey, following my cancer journey, when I was turning to some pretty unhealthy coping mechanisms far too often. I want you to think about where your voice needs to be heard. Is it inside of your marriage? To give or get the wisdom, perspective, and support that's needed? Is it sharing a deep-rooted desire that you've held inside of yourself ever since you were little, and when you speak it openly, you feel empowered and free with a new sense of direction? Maybe it's teaching your own children to use their voices so that they can have agency over their own lives and possibly have a positive influence on the life of someone else, like my 3 girls did for me. I want you to connect with your inner Mike. And if you don't have one, borrow from mine. The one that said, figure it out, whatever it is you need to do to find your happiness. And then go out there and share it with whoever needs to know by speaking your voice out loud. Because your voice doesn't have to sound good to be great. It just has to be heard. Thank you.